If you sit in a river on a kayak and you don't paddle, you'll just go out of control. If you constantly paddle forward, then you're going to stay in control. And it's the same thing with life. If you just constantly put yourself in a position of discomfort, learning things you don't want to learn, serving people that you maybe don't deep down feel like you want to serve, but just digging in and serving, you're going to get into situations where you find pain that you can solve. And you'll be able to be a better person, better character, and a much better entrepreneur.
Jeffrey Harmon is a visionary entrepreneur who turned his obsession with stories and viral marketing into a movement that lets regular people, not Hollywood, greenlight the movies and shows they want you to see. Today, he's one of the key forces behind a wave of hit, faith and family-focused projects funded by fans, proving you can hack the entertainment system and build your own path if you're bold enough. Welcome to How I Started, the podcast where we share the real stories behind remarkable entrepreneurs and the companies they've built. I'm Connor Boyack, your host and president of the Children's Entrepreneur Market, where we help kids ages 5 to 17 launch their very first business. In each episode, we'll explore how great ideas grow into lasting success, what lessons shape those journeys, and how mentorship builds the next generation of entrepreneurs. Whether you're just starting out, scaling up, or looking to inspire others, you're in the right place. Let's explore the stories that prove every great venture begins with a single step. Jeff, thanks for joining the program.
Thanks for having me on, Connor.
You are Mr. Entrepreneur. Before we get into all of the fun things that you've been involved in over the years and what you're doing now with Angel, I want to go maybe back to the very beginning. I know there's a story in Idaho and a story with potatoes. And, I want you to share with the audience, what was your first entrepreneurial experience that you had?
Yeah, usually businesses are born out of wanting to buy something. Mine was as kids, when you're a kid. And mine was when I was 11 years old, I wanted to go to a private school because there was a girl at that school I liked. And so I needed to figure out a way to pay for tuition, and I got some scholarship, but I also needed to pay. And the way I figured out how to pay for it is I would take, my grandpa lived about a mile away and he had a big, huge potato farm, and they had potatoes in a potato cellar. And there was a potato processing plant down a ways away from us. And so I went and bought potato boxes that looked official with a brand on them and everything, but they didn't have anything in them. And it said russet potatoes. And I took those boxes that were empty and took them to my grandpa's cellar, and then just picked out potatoes and filled up those 50-pound boxes, and then put them in the back of my dad's Ford Taurus station wagon. You guys probably even don't know what a station wagon is necessarily today because they don't exist really, but a station wagon. And then we would drive. He worked in Utah, and so he'd drive to Utah during the week, and I hitched a ride with him, got free gas, drove down to Utah. And then my other grandpa, so I had two grandpas, one in Idaho, one in Utah, and my other grandpa's house, I stored the potatoes in his garage, borrowed a scale from him and borrowed his bike, and then walked down to the grocery store and got free paper bags, and then would go door to door with a script. And I said, "Hi, my name's Jeffrey Harmon. I am Frank Harmon's grandson," which they all knew who he was because had been in the neighborhood for a long time. "I am selling potatoes, fresh Idaho potatoes from my grandpa's farm in Idaho to pay for my school tuition." And almost everybody bought potatoes from me.
How could anybody say no to that?
Yeah. They would open the door and they'd be like, and they'd only buy a little bit, some of them. That's why I had to get paper bags, because the first person would not buy a box. It was too much for them. And so I went down to the grocery store, got paper bags, and divided them up with a scale with my grandpa. And then I would take him a paper bag on a bicycle that didn't have any type of thing to hold it. So I had one hand bike with a paper bag of potatoes, go deliver the potatoes, then go sell more potatoes, then deliver the potatoes and go sell more potatoes. And the first day that I did it, I sold out of my potatoes, and I figured out I was earning $110 an hour.
As an 11-year-old.
Yes, as an 11-year-old. Now, I wasn't really earning $110 an hour. One, at that point, my grandpa wasn't charging me for the potatoes. He just let me go try it. Number two, I didn't have to pay for the trip down. I didn't consider the 4-hour drive. and time it took. So that adds 4 hours, and that brings it down to $25 an hour for what, you get what I'm saying. And then I didn't count the time it took to go get the boxes and box up the potatoes, etc. And over time, I learned what real costs were in the business, and I started scaling up this business. I would bring down potatoes every week. And then I went to the farm and I asked them, can I borrow one of the pickup trucks from the farm? And I got a whole truckload of potatoes and drove it down to Utah. And I was bringing so many potatoes to the point that I asked them for a farm trailer.
Wow.
And now this is older. This is a couple years later that this was starting to happen. And I had a driver's license at this point. In Idaho at that time, you could get a driver's license at 14 years old. And so I was driving these trucks. And then by 15, I was driving a trailer down to Idaho, to Utah, full of potatoes borrowed from my grandpa's farm. And it was my uncle's farm at this point. They had taken over and selling potatoes. And then I would go down to my brother's house and I would store them in his garage. He never charged me, my oldest brother, to store them in his garage. So I was getting away with all kinds of stuff that just normally, like, and you got to take advantage of this, because when you're a kid, you do get lots of costs covered for you, and you need to enjoy those while.
Jeff, let me jump in there, because that's a very important point. Some might push back on your story and say, all right, well, you're not actually being entrepreneurial. You're just like preying on people's desire to support kids. And, did they really want potatoes, or did they just think, oh, here's this, kid being cute? To which I like to say, like with our kids at our kids market program, it's like, use whatever advantage you can in life, right? If it's this moment of time where people are more likely to patron your business because you're cute, and they want to support a kid, use it. If you're like 6'8", go play basketball. Like, use the advantages that you have in life. What's your reaction to that?
Any honest advantage you have, you should use it. That is how the world works. And that's how people make money, is that everybody has different advantages. My advantage was I had a grandpa and uncles that had a potato farm that had potatoes. I don't think that's ever been considered an advantage before, but until now, once you figure out how to make money, everybody's going to say, well, you did that unfairly because there was a hole that you exploited. And that's the whole point, is that you find things in the market that haven't been exploited and you exploit the hole. And I'll explain a little later about how YouTube, when it started, how we exploited a hole on YouTube. But my uncles, one day after years of this, he just showed up with a 15-passenger Ford Econoline van that was yellow. It was originally white, but it was yellow with like dirt from Kennecott copper mines. And he said, I was at an auction this weekend buying equipment at the Kennecott copper mine for the farm. And I saw this van and I decided I'm going to buy this van. And I got it on an auction for $900. It has 300,000 miles on it. And it's now your van. Here's the keys. You owe me $900 and you're going to stop using my farm stuff. So he gave me a $900 loan for a van that I didn't ask for. And I got a pressure washer and I cleaned out the van and sprayed out all the seats and just took out all the seats and turned it into a moving truck essentially, and then filled it up with, it was a 1-ton vehicle or half-ton vehicle, but I would put 1 ton of potatoes in it. So I overloaded it, and it had old tires that the Kennecott copper mine had just stuck on it to get it on the auction. And 2 of those tires, while I was driving 80 miles an hour down the freeway, blew out on me with potatoes in the back.
Oh, wow.
Eventually I got all new. After 2 of them, I was like, we're getting all new tires.
And how old are you at this point when you get the van?
It was around 15. I think it was right after I borrowed a trailer to get potatoes. That's when that happened. They were like, this is getting out of control.
So you've been doing this for several years at this point. You've been doing the potato kind of shtick. How much longer did you continue that, and or like what came next after potatoes?
So with potatoes, I paid for half of a mission, a 2-year mission. I saved up about $5,000 with that. And my grandpa had a rule that he did for all his grandkids, my grandpa in Utah, where if you put money away for a mission or to go serve a mission to preach the gospel or for college, he would double the money. And so I put that $5,000 in, and that saved up, and then he doubled it, and that allowed me to go serve a 2-year mission for my church, for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so I did that. I ended up hiring my older brother, to come work for me on selling potatoes. I hired my younger brothers and sisters to go box the potatoes, because that was the worst part, was boxing them was miserable. And so I'd get a whole bunch of potatoes, then we'd go to the seller and I'd say, you guys box the potatoes, and I would pay them $1 per box or $2 per box that they filled up. And then they started saying, I don't want to do this. It's too much work. And I said, well, here's more money. And then they eventually got to where they didn't ever want to do it, until I realized that if I bought red vines, the candy, and I offered a bag of red vines that cost me $1 or $1.50, that they would box all the potatoes, and it cost me about 1/10 what they were charging me in cash. And so I used red vines to get them to mow the lawn. I used red vines to get them to box the potatoes, and that was also an advantage that I was able to use red vines.
What prompted that thought though, right? Because like a lot of the kids at our markets or that are being entrepreneurial, they'll kind of grind it out, right? They'll be a one-man operation. They'll just keep doing everything themselves. Here you are figuring out like, okay, I've been doing it myself for a while. If I want to grow or if I want to earn more money, I need more people. How did you know to do that? Or was that just a natural thing to figure out that you got to expand beyond yourself?
Yeah, it was just kind of doing the math and being like, well, if I make $20 on a box and the box itself cost me 50 cents and the potatoes cost me $1.50, then I've got $18, and then there's the gasoline. And so I've got about $10, and I can pay something in labor to help box these, which was definitely the most miserable part, was boxing. And so it was miserable and misery in a job. If you do it over and over again, eventually your brain is going to come up with something that makes it less miserable. And that can be hiring other people, that can be systematizing. And I was doing all that kind of stuff. So pain drives innovation. That's a principle. Like, there is no exception. If you want to innovate and create something new or solve a problem or make money, the pain of not being able to pay for school, or the pain of not being able to get your boxes filled up fast enough. Pain drives innovation. That's where tractors come from. That's where all kinds of things. And this happens on a micro environment. So as an entrepreneur, you need to embrace pain. Like,
Jeff,
go ahead.
Let me jump in there. I want to agree with you. So Joe Polish is an entrepreneur, kind of coach and connector. And he wrote a book in which he says, I love this quote. He says, the way to succeed is to become a pain detective. You're exactly right. Like, pain leads to innovation. And a lot of people, I think especially kids, want to shy away from pain. They want to avoid pain. But like Joe says, if you become a pain detective, what you're really doing is you're trying to understand what are pains that other people have, or what are pains that I have. And if I can figure out what those pains are, I can then formulate solutions around them. I want to use that as a segue into your story with college with Orabrush. You connect with an entrepreneur who has a pain. He has a problem. He's trying to sell this thing. You come up with a solution. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah. So this is like, I think that would be like the third or fourth or fifth business, because after that I did a landscaping business, and there's a whole bunch of stuff I did. But if you need to get to college, I'm in my last day of my last class at school, and there's this guy named Dr. Bob. He was 72 years old at the time. And he said he had created this tongue cleaner to help cure bad breath. And he had actually served once again as a mission president, and he had missionaries that had really bad breath on his mission in the Philippines. And he was a doctor, and he had learned that bad breath comes from the tongue. And so he'd built this tongue cleaner to try to solve this problem. And now he's trying to sell it. So his pain was, I've got these missionaries who have terrible breath. If I can just teach them to clean their tongue. And then he wasn't satisfied with the tongue cleaners, and he made one. He made a tongue cleaner. And the students in this class said, this is really hard to sell. Only 8% of people will buy this on the internet. This was before Amazon was really big. And they said, so you just need to go partner with like Crest or Colgate or Procter & Gamble. You got to partner with one of these big brands in order to get this out. And I put up my hand. I would sit in the back of class and I watched YouTube videos. And I often said, like, Nightline came and interviewed me. Nightline, the old news organization, they came and interviewed me about this story. And they said, so where'd you learn all the stuff you're doing at Orabrush? That was the name of the tongue cleaner. And I said, I learned everything while I wasn't paying attention in school. But I was sitting there watching YouTube videos, reading blogs, reading about marketing, and I just put my hand up and I said, well, why wouldn't you focus on the 8% of people? That's still like 30 million people. That's a lot of people. And Dr. Bob came up to me afterwards and said, will you help me market my my aura brush. And I said, I agreed after, and then later I didn't have a car yet. I didn't want to go into debt for school. I did end up a little bit of debt. And then I figured until I get out of debt, I'm not going to buy a car. So I was riding a bicycle around and he would pick me up, take me to his house in his truck. And then one day he took me out behind his house and he said, I've got this old motorcycle. I'll give it to you if you promise to stay on this project for 8 months and help me try to figure out how to market aura brush. He said, okay, I'll do it. And we worked on it. And then we ended up YouTube. During that time, we tried all kinds of things and they all failed. We spent thousands of dollars trying different types of things. And every time we would spend $1, we'd only get 50 cents back in sales or less. And YouTube launched a new service called AdWords, where you could buy ads on YouTube, video ads on YouTube. And it was brand new. It was the first time anybody had really put ads on YouTube at all. And I went to my roommate, his name's Devin Supertramp on YouTube now, today. He wasn't in YouTube at the time. He was a film student. And I said, can we make a video for this aura brush? And the way I got the idea was there was a video on YouTube called Howcast. And on that video, there was Howcast had a tutorial video on how to tell if you have bad breath. And the way you could tell if you have bad breath is you take a spoon and you scrape the back of your tongue and let it dry for 5 seconds and then smell it. And if it smells bad, your breath's bad. And so that was the Howcast video. That had hundreds of thousands of views. Hundreds of thousands of people watch this how to tell if you have bad breath video with a spoon. And I thought, okay, what if I make it more punchy and jumpy like the new YouTube videos? And I guess somebody could talk about it and we teach people how to tell if they had bad breath. And then we'd say, and here's the solution. You can clean the back of your tongue with this aura brush. So we went and we wrote a script. I had another roommate named Joel Ackerman. He wrote the script. My other roommate was a filmmaker. He did it. I didn't have to learn how to do film. I did not have to learn how to shoot a video. I didn't have to learn how to write. I wrote up some of it, and surprisingly, all of my experience of selling potatoes door to door taught me how to sell the aura brush on YouTube. And so I wrote up the bones of the script, and then Joel Ackerman made them very funny. And then I asked another roommate named Austin Craig, who was his majoring in TV stuff. He was a newscaster type. I asked him to dress up with goggles like a mad scientist with a lab coat. So he just wore his normal t-shirt, has his orange t-shirt underneath. He puts a lab coat on and we put goggles on him. And he's like, how to tell if you have bad breath. And he goes and does a pitch and explains how to do this. Now, at the time I didn't understand, but because no one was advertising on YouTube, it only cost a penny per view or less to buy views on YouTube. That's super cheap, especially compared to today. And so I was getting people to watch this video for a penny a piece. And we launched the ad and we started advertising. And I asked my other brother to build a website, which I didn't know how to do. And we built a website and we took credit card transactions and we started selling aura brushes. And pretty soon we were spending $1 in ads and we were getting back $2 in revenue. And people would buy $2 worth and we'd spend $1. And then I'd take the $2 that we earned, put $2 in, get $4 back, and then put $4 in, get $8 back, get $8 and put $16 back. And we scaled that up and we built off of that early phase of YouTube a $10 million company.
That's really impressive. And I feel like there's a lot of lessons to extract there before, in our remaining minutes, I want to briefly get into the angel story and some lessons from that. One thing that I observe in your story with aura brush, connecting it back to the potato story, is that entrepreneurship is not a solo venture. You didn't know how to build a website. You didn't know how to, film video. You weren't an actor. You were more like the choir director, and you've got all kinds of different people singing from the same sheet of music, but different notes and different, everyone has a part, but you're more the conductor of saying, I need these people to do this. And so talk about that with your journey of entrepreneurship. I think a lot of people misconstrue it as like, yeah, I'm going to be the person, but really this is a team effort. So what's the lesson there for kids about if they want to succeed and how they need to, maybe the lesson is you got to build a network and meet people who have different skills and backgrounds so that you can then use them like you used your roommates.
Yeah, it's just, if you have an objective, mine was to sell the aura brush. And then I had the idea after trying all these things that failed. And I tried all kinds of innovative things for the things that failed too. I mean, we tried lots of interesting stuff. But the objective was, I need a video that sells this. So the idea came from Howcast. It came from a YouTuber called iJustine at the time, and I used a white background like she had and jump cuts. And I was studying what they were doing. And then I was like, okay, how do I make a video? I know a roommate that has a camera and he does studies film. How do I write a script? Oh, I have this person. And so it's like, how do I do this? And then you go find the resources and then you negotiate and then you run up against walls and you just try to fix it. And it's critical. Like if you want to do anything, you need lots of people and you have to do exchanges of values or call in favors or whatever it is. Or in many cases, you actually have to like do your normal boring job to pay for the job you wish you were doing, even though you don't get paid for it. We call it runway. Like a little business takes a little bit of runway and a big business takes a lot of runway, but you have a period of time that you can operate and pay for your food and pay for whatever it is for the business. And then you'll run out of runway if you don't get more runway, which is money. And so you need to keep doing your job of whether it's a paper route or, working at a restaurant or whatever it is, a waiter, whatever it is that you're doing, mowing lawns, you need to do your regular job to pay for your other job so that hopefully you can make money at some point and make a lot more money. And then today, like one way to look at this is there's AI available and you can actually use AI to help you take care of digital tasks, and don't be afraid to use those like resources because it allows people to be much faster.
Jeff, let me, final few minutes. So I want to briefly kind of help viewers and listeners understand where you're at. And then I want to understand what lessons from your earlier experiences in entrepreneurship are you applying and using today to help you. So give us a little sense, maybe rapid fire questions about how many people work at Angel currently, would you say?
Over 300.
So, okay, you've got over 300 people. You and your brothers are running Angel. What's like total revenue, or give kids a sense of like how much revenue you guys are doing at Angel?
Hundreds of millions of dollars over the last years.
Hundreds of millions of dollars. And then you've got a guild, which is like a membership program on Angel where people can get access to all the content. So how many people are in the guild as of when we're recording this?
There's 2 million people in the guild. And they get to, if you're a guild member, you get to vote on the movies that come into Angel Studios. You can vote for kids' movies.
A lot of our listeners are familiar with Angel because of the Tuttle Twins cartoon, which is on Angel.
Right.
So you're now, you and your
Tuttle Twins
brothers
is our top 3 TV series for Angel.
You and your brothers are running Angel. You all come from the potato farmer background. And so for kids hearing your story and they're, wow, that's a, big company. You guys have taken on Disney and Court, and you're taking on Hollywood, and you've had all these like big successes and projects that you're doing. So, and they can go look into that and they can ask AI all about Jeff Harmon and Angel and get all the details. What I want to leave them with in our final couple minutes is, here you are, an entrepreneur's entrepreneur doing all these big things. What would 11-year-old potato hustling Jeffrey Harmon think of you now? What are those early learnings that you still carry forward today with what you're doing?
We still use the exact same principle of, if I spend $1, I need to get $2 back. And we look at it and say, how much does it spend to get a new guild member? How much did we spend to get a movie? How much does it bring back? It's the exact same principles, just on a bigger scale. And so the things you're learning in a little business, and there's also like little exploits that you can do where you realize, oh, there's a bug, almost like a bug in the system where people aren't realizing that this problem exists in the industry. And if we exploit that, we can actually have an advantage over the other studios. And so we're the bug, one of the big bugs in our case is nobody's making movies for our types of families. They're not making Tuttle Twins is a good example. That nobody's making a cartoon that actually teaches kids what we think are the most important things in society. And so let's make a cartoon that teaches kids the most important things. That's like a bug. They can't see it. They don't understand it. And if you go make it, then now Tuttle Twins has hundreds of millions of views, is on public TV in Argentina. And Connor, thanks to you in starting Tuttle Twins, this is changing society in its own way. And so I think you got to understand that the same principles that will make a business work when you're young are the same principles that you're going to need to know when you're older. Pain drives innovation. Like a pain detective, as he was saying, you should embrace when there's pain. It doesn't mean you should do the same thing over and over again in the pain. Like do it 3 times very painfully or maybe 100 times, but have a limit where you say, I figured out a better way. But do embrace the pain and do the painful things to figure out how to innovate better. And then you'll find new painful things to deal with because pain and growth go together. There's a really interesting concept. I've been reading a book, and whether or not I don't know what I think it's a book called 23 Letters from Rockefeller to His Son, J.D. Rockefeller. I think it's John D. Rockefeller to his son. And Rockefeller is not necessarily like the perfect example in every case, but he has this concept that he tells his son is he says, I grew up in poverty. I grew up at the bottom of the mountain. You're growing up at the top of the mountain. And then he gave a study and he said 18 out of 20 people who started midway or halfway up the mountain or up the mountain end up at the bottom of the mountain. Only 2 progressed up. And he says to his son, he says, you may be at an advantage that your starting point, but it does not determine your ending point. And he says, your starting point does not determine your ending point. He said, the problem with starting halfway up the mountain is that you're not forced to learn character. You're not forced to go through the hard things that I was forced to, and you have a disadvantage to your peers that are forced to come up from the bottom of the mountain because coming up from the bottom, you have to experience pain, and pain creates innovation and it creates character. And he's saying to his son, if you don't learn these things, you will not stay up at the top of the mountain, not in an ethical way. And so as we move into a world today where lots of kids have lots of physical things taken care of for them, you need to be thinking to yourself, how do I intentionally put myself in a way that I can create character? So that I can experience some pain in order to know how to solve problems, in order to know how to have character so that I can climb further up the mountain rather than rolling back down the mountain. And if I was to tell my younger self, I would say, you have an advantage that others don't. You're growing up in poverty. You might think it's a disadvantage, but this is a huge advantage that's going to help you when you're in your 40s and you've got all your kids. You're going to have experiences from the time you were little that other kids can't have, that makes it so that you can compete in a different way that nobody else can compete back with big Hollywood executives, with big Hollywood elites, because they can't learn the things that you've learned because they didn't get to experience being at the bottom of the mountain. And I think that's a big lesson is like, it's an advantage. It's not a disadvantage.
And so for the kids listening, they're growing up in different homes, different, upper class, middle class, wealth, poverty, whatever. If you're not experiencing pain of some kind, maybe seek it out, not go destroy your life or do crazy stuff or create chaos. But if you don't have pain, look at other people's pain. Again, be a pain detective. The lady down the road who has arthritis and, can't pull weeds anymore, she needs someone to pull weeds. Can you solve that pain for her? Mom has dirty dishes in the sink. She hates going to sleep with dirty dishes in the sink. That is a pain for her. Can you, not that you're going to charge her money to do this, you're going to be a loving son or daughter to...
You're going to learn character.
Exactly. You're going to create a positive relationship by proactively creating value for others, and you're solving a problem without being asked. I think that's good. An amazing lesson for all of us to learn. Jeff, for the families who aren't yet watching Tuttle Twins, aren't yet on Angel, where do they go and what do they do?
Just go to angel.com and you can sign up as a guild member and start watching Tuttle Twins right away. We go to angel.com/Tuttle Twins, and I think you can watch some episodes for free as well. I don't have the exact website of that, but Connor can give a link. And then download the TV apps and you can watch it there. One more comment on pain is, when 100 years ago, there was no such thing as an exercise industry. There was no such thing as like cold plunges. There was no such thing as these things where you intentionally put yourself through. Like if anybody goes to the gym, they know you become very sore if you lift weights. It's painful. It's not a great experience. Like naturally, you don't think of it as a good experience. But our ancestors were lifting potato sacks and hoeing beets and pushing plows and doing all kinds of really heavy, hard work that made it so they didn't need to exercise. So there was no such thing as an exercise industry. Like, I think our ancestors would look at these contraption and machines and like a fitness gym and be like, what the heck is this? Why are they trying to burn calories on purpose? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why are they going for runs to nowhere and back from runs to nowhere? And it's because people who know better know that your mind can't keep up if there's not that strain on your body. Like, if you don't put yourself through the pain that you were naturally made to be able to handle, you need to actually invent pain. And so the same thing goes for working and learning how to do things. Is you need to intentionally put yourself into circumstances that challenge your mind and your brain. And don't be, if you sit in a river on a kayak and you don't paddle, you'll just go out of control. If you constantly paddle forward, then you're going to stay in control. And it's the same thing with life. If you just constantly put yourself in a position of discomfort and learning things you don't want to learn, serving people that you maybe don't deep down feel like you want to serve, but just digging in and serving, you're going to get into situations where you find pain that you can solve. And you'll be able to be a better person, better character, and a much better entrepreneur.
Love it. Great parting words. Jeffrey Harmon with angel.com. Guys, go tell your parents to sign up, join the guild, watch Tuttle Twins and all the other cool stuff that's on there. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Connor.